We haven't started yet. Oops.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Scrutiny Panel 3 Children's Services. I'm Councillor Hodan Haley, the Chair. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Councillor Greg Stafford, Vice Chair.
So we have few officers online and few members online as well. I just want to start the programme this evening. We have apologies from Councillor Hashani and Councillor Kingston. Item 2, there are no urgent matters and there are also no matters to be considered in private. I would like to make, is there any declaration of interest from the members? No? Thank you. Before we start our meeting, our agenda this evening, I just want to ask the members if we could approve the last meeting's minutes. Is everybody agreed? Yeah. So we approve that minutes. Okay, we're going to go straight into our Ealing Safeguarding Partnership report this evening, and we have Robert McCluck-Graham online. Over to you, Graham.
Okay, thanks very much. I was intending just to give a bit of an introduction to the report and the paper, and then hopefully hand over to yourselves for any questions that you might have. And I've got a colleague, Steve Bourne here, who is the business manager for the partnership. But if I give introductions just now and just give you a bit of an explanation as to who I am, because I'm quite new to Ealing, or maybe not that new now, about 6 months in. So I just want to start by saying that I've taken over the position from Sheila Locke, and she would have given you previous reports. And actually, the body of this report is when Sheila was there as the independent chair previous to that. And so a lot of this was actually, the report is based on the work that she was undertaking with partners then. So if I just give an introduction to the report. So the actual Children's Safeguarding Partnership is a statutory body in every local authority area, and it's made up of 3 strategic partners. So as well as the council, there are also our health colleagues represented in the main through the ICB, and here, and that's in Northwest London, ICB for us. And it's also through the police, and for us, that's the West Command Unit, sorry, for the MP, for the Metropolitan Police Service. So those are the 3 major partners we have. Obviously, we've stretched the partnership as wide as we possibly can, and we have representatives from the voluntary sector and from other agencies. But those are the 3 strategic partners that we have there. There is some current work underway nationally to see whether we can bring in more of our education partners into that fold. But at the moment, they're represented through the council as per se. But in the future, we may well have a direct representation from schools on the partnership too in the future. So the three basic functions of the partnership. One is to provide a strategic plan for how we might improve safeguarding for children kneeling. The second is to then produce an annual report based on our actions on that strategic plan each year. And this report is focusing on the year 22 to 23. And as part of that, this report, specifically for children's, but also within adults, but it's more specifically detailed in children's, that this is an assurance report for all partners. And I'll come back to that. This is the opportunity for the partnership through me as an independent chair to give you an assurance that safeguarding is being undertaken sufficiently well within Ealing, within this. So that's the assurance aspect of it. The other third area or statutory duty for the partnership is to undertake children's safeguarding practice reviews when we have a significant incident of abuse or whatever that abuse is on a child. And we undertake a review, specific review, where we believe there is learning to be had that we can transfer to those services and to improve practice so that we might reduce the level of risk that's evident within those particular areas. And the report itself has got a summary of some of the work that's been taken on during that year of 22 to 23. So just wanted to talk a little bit about the nature of the partnership and how it actually operates. We could be accused of policing ourselves because we are the body that actually provides that level of insight, that level of scrutiny across all of our partners, and to pull them and to challenge them in their practice so that we actually do keep a handle on the risk to children and actually able to reduce that. Now, the way that we do that is by securing our independence, and we secure our independence because we have a full partnership. So when people attend the board and when people work for the partnership rather, they're doing so when they leave their hats and their profession behind, if you like, so that they can help support collectively across all of those agencies and therefore provide the right level of scrutiny and investigation and challenge to individual services. So Robert's here is Director of Children's Services. He's also a very important part and a statutory partner of the board. So he's there as a scrutineer for safeguarding across the whole of the partnership. And he will join in with others in challenging their practice, and he will be challenged by others on his practice within the services for which he's responsible to. So it's important to know that there is it could be argued, a bit of a dichotomy that the partnership is made up of people that we're actually scrutinising within there. So that's why it's important that my role within that is as an independent chair. So I'm not responsible to any single partner within there. I am responsible to the whole of the partnership as that chair. And that's the way that we oversee that level of work. And I'm there to ensure that that level of challenge takes place. So as I said, one of the statutory duties is to provide you with an annual report and an assurance statement. And that's what this paper does just now. So the areas that it actually covers, I'll just go through very quickly and give you more time for questioning on that. So the paper itself gives an outline of how we undertake those duties. So it gives an explanation as to the structure, the functioning, and the working of that partnership. And it becomes a good reference document for anyone that's actually coming in to see how safeguarding is maintained within Ealing itself. So it's a bit of a reference document. So you'll see some repetition from year on year in. So but that's because it's there to allow people insight as to how the safeguarding procedures and processes are actually operating within Ealing. So we start off with that description within the paper, and we give you how the subgroups are actually formed. And this partnership doesn't operate on its own. And the safeguarding responsibilities naturally have to involve other boards. So we work very closely with the Ealing Youth Justice Board, with the Ealing Safeguarding Adults Board, the Community Safety Partnership, and also the Ealing Learning Partnership. So those are partnerships that are already in existence, and we work very closely with them, keeping children at the foremost of our minds and how we actually work within that. So it's very much a very wide partnership, and I'm pleased to say within Ealing that works very well, and we have good interplay between each of those partnerships and good conversations that go on between the leadership of those partnerships as well. The document, the report here, outlines the visions, values and principles of the partnership, which we actually follow. I think we have some further work to do on that. We undertook a development session recently across the partners, and we're looking towards setting a new strategy next year. But as I say, this report is focusing on the existing strategy that was in place in 22-23. It gives an outline of how we performed, and there's a large amount of data that's held within here. I think it's fair to say that we could be doing better in our collection of data, especially from some of the partners outside of the council. And we will be using that as a significant work stream next year, so that we'll produce a balanced scorecard for safeguarding, so that we can give a greater level of assurance around our ability to safeguard children in Ealing across all of the individual players within the partnership. So we're trying to take away that current skew that we see in the presentation of the data at the present time. And that's work that's currently underway, and we hope to be able to report on that in next year's paper. But you'll see here that we've reported as is in this paper, and we've given quite a fair bit of examination of the presentation of cases that we've currently got. One of the themes that Sheila was particularly strident in was around the promoting active learning and the involvement of young people within that. There is a very useful group that's been formed over a number of years within Ealing, which is the Young People's Safeguarding group. So it's the YES group, and they are seen as a real force at putting children at the very heart of everything that we actually do within there. And they've presented already at the partnership since I've been here, and we're hoping to increase their influence across all of the partners, so that we make sure that we actually get things right and we actually speak with their voice. And the paper outlines our priorities, and it's gone through the evidence of impact. We've moved on in the report to look at what's going to happen in future years. And I suppose the biggest thing that we're seeing coming across from all partners is, and I've said it in the introduction to the paper, we're still seeing the impact of the pandemic. It's just not going away. We're still getting cases of it that are impacting in all of our services and in our communities. So there is an immense amount of stress still within the system. People are still incredibly busy. The number of referrals are on the up. We've seen a bit of a dip last year within children's referrals, but actually in the last 12 months, they've come back up to a par within there. The type of presentations we're seeing are much more complex than we've seen in the past, and there's a higher degree of acuity and what has been presented to us as well. So we've seen the pressure increase, we've seen the complexity increase, and this is at a time when our resources are under strain across the whole of the partnership. So moving into 23-24, we remain particularly challenged, and if not more so. And I think what we have to do is to start to look at areas of resource that we might not have tapped before. And I think the biggest area that we would want to examine is actually the communities themselves. So we would want to see a work stream developed and then priority developed across the partnership, which is actually working much more closely with our communities, and to see how we can actually help our communities actually support themselves and actually help reduce the level of risk that's already there. And that's an area of work that I particularly want to see the partnership actually take on board, and we'll be reporting on that next year. And the report finishes with the statement of assurance, which would normally have come from Sheila, but she's moved on and I'm there. So I'm kind of speaking on behalf of Sheila's work there. And that's what I've tried to explain within that statement of assurance. If I can just give you a general impression of being here for about the last 6 months, there's a great deal of commitment across all of the partners that are involved in the partnership, and a great degree of willingness on their part to work collectively towards that single goal. There is a degree of openness in Ealing, which is very refreshing. In my experience elsewhere, that's not always present. And the involvement of all of the partners is they're keen to do that, but I think in some ways they've been hindered perhaps in the past with some of the processes that we've had in place. So we're going to see if we can eradicate some of those areas and blocks to that partnership working and move forward from that. And as I say, I think the biggest drive for that is actually the commitment of individuals and individual leaders within those partnerships that are willing to take that forward. So I'll close there really and open for any particular questions that you might have, or any areas of concern or areas that you want to enter into discussion.
Thank you, Rob. Any questions? Okay.
Thank you very much. It's Councillor Stafford here. I suppose my question is really more on initially on the sort of layout of the report and its ambitions. And I know you've talked a bit about having a balanced scorecard and things like that, but it starts off sort of very mother of pearl and apple pie with visions and value and principles. I think one of which says, we will make a difference for children and young people. I mean, I think it could only be more bland if you said you make a positive difference, which I assume is what you're trying to do. But in the values, it says that you're going to be outcome driven. And what I'm not getting from this report is the connection between what you're trying to achieve and the outcomes. So, i.e., what you as the partnership or the component parts of the partnership are doing to achieve those outcomes. So I think there is quite a lot of data in here, but what's unclear to me is how you get from what you're trying to achieve to the outcome, and therefore I'm not really sure whether the outcomes described are better than average, worse than average, what you set out to achieve are not what you set out to achieve. And so I just wondered whether you could give us some more information about how we can make this report, for those of us who are scrutinizing it, easier to hold you to account to it.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, a fair question to ask, Councillor. I think what's missing perhaps in it is the clear strategic plan which this is meant to report on. So what we have had in place in Ealing is a business plan that's been taken on the priorities itself. So I think moving forward from this, I think it's having a clear indication as to the strategy of the partnership, the areas of work that they'll be moving into. And it'll be much clearer then that we can actually report on the level of impact it's doing it. And perhaps that's missing here. And I would take that as a valid criticism really within it. Outcome driven is really looking at the areas of work that we're trying to do to reduce the level of risk to children. So the types of activities, the types of services, the work that goes between each of the services, transition being one of them. So there's a number of areas where we would seek to work across the partnership, which would be trying to drive down the number of referrals that are made and the responses to the referral, so that we've actually can measure a reduction in risk. So that would be the intention for doing that. The report is fairly general in how it's actually replying there, and I would accept what you're actually saying there. But moving forward from that, I'd really want us to be a bit more detailed around the strategies that we would want to import for the next year. And actually, when we do that, actually indicate how we will be reporting on how they're going to have an effect and the impact of that ahead of time. So it'll actually make the reporting easier for next year. But as it stands just now, we've given a fairly general, it's quite wide actually, the amount of data that is presented here. So we've given that and the understanding that collectively within that, it must have an impact there. But it's quite difficult sometimes when you're going through the body of the report to say what the consequences of one particular action have been. So I do take that. And it may well be that we'll have further reports, not necessarily just within an annual report, but on actual particular strategies that have been put in place. One of the areas in particular, I think this is nationally, is trying to look much more at earlier intervention than we have in some cases across the partnerships, and to try and actually promote that rather than being a bolt-on to individual services, but really having a particular focus or actually picking up our information and our data and our intelligence, and actually trying to turn that around much, much quicker so that we can actually respond to that. I think that's the only way we can go forward because of the lack of the difficulty with the level of resources. There's no new monies coming into this particular area. So we've got to find resource where it is. And that's why I'm saying that a closer relationship and understanding of our place and our communities will allow us to actually target some of the work we've got much more effectively. So it's rather than a scattergun, we're actually going into the particular areas of risk and actually reducing them. And in the end, that's going to help us with resources as well as having better outcomes for individuals. Sorry, it's a bit of a ramble and an answer to, because your question actually opens up quite a lot. When you start talking about outcomes driven, it does seem a bit motherhood and apple pie, but we can break it down. We can be much more direct about what we mean in it, and that's an intention for the future.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Okay, Councillor.
Yeah, I think it would be really helpful in the future if we could have a benchmark to work from, because there's a lot of stats, but there's nothing to compare those stats with. So, you know, I take on board the point that my colleagues already made. Can I just pick on particular aspects of the report? It states that we've appointed a missing children's coordinator. Can you tell me when this appointment was made? And what is the scale of the issue that individual will be dealing with? And what does the trajectory look like? And what is the ethnicity breakdown of these children?
I can talk in general terms around the missing children. I couldn't give you the details. It's probably much more for the services to actually reply to that. It's where they're actually based on the appointment that was actually made within there. There has been a national report on missing children. It's been coming out. We've known for a long time there are certain populations of our young people who are much more vulnerable than others. The missing children covers two groups in the main. There are a number of looked after children, particularly in residential units, who are amongst the highest targets for criminal activity and for sexual exploitation and exploitation of a great deal of areas within that. And we do know that individuals within our society actually target those particular groups. We have in the past tried to harden that target to make it more difficult for them, and we've done a response. There are certain tactics that we use with children who go missing. That's one particular group, and I'll come back to them. The other group is people that are just missing from home. And then we have some repeat missing people that do it quite often. It's quite often a signal for abuse within the home or neglect within the home. And it's how we actually follow up on those. And this appointment, I think, nationally is going to be very useful within that, because it gives us a way of actually focusing in on it. So we would expect to have some targets within this work around how quickly we can respond to any notification of a missing child. Also, when a child is returned, is there a follow-up meeting? Is there a debrief within that? Which services? So there will be a process, there should be a process that comes in for actually doing that. And we would expect that the partnership, we would scrutinise those details to make sure that those are actually happening and taking place. That would be our responsibility as a partnership. But the actual introduction of the post is with the service itself.
I've got a follow-up. Are you going to answer that? Oh, you go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you for the question, Councillor. That's
right. Councillor Wright, can you turn on? Oh, sorry. I was too engrossed in listening to the answer.
Yeah, thank you for the question. In terms of the appointment was made relatively recently. I couldn't give you a date, but it's very recent. In terms of the response to missing children and the completion of a process which is referred to as return home interviews, I think we've got a bit of a mixed bag there. We work with the police on those return home interviews. And I don't think we've struck consistency in the practice in that area. And that's one of the reasons for the coordinator role. What I would suggest, rather than me giving you more general answers, is that one of the things that this committee might want to, or panel may want to consider, is whether we actually schedule a substantive item on children who go missing, and actually look at that, have a report here and go through the detail of that. We can provide figures. We do have, through the London Innovation and Improvement Alliance, the 32 boroughs in the City of London actually share a data set which shows you the position of Ealing against other local authorities. So we can share that.
So what is the position like at the moment, roughly? I mean, is it an upward trend or is it flatter? Okay. So what is the position in Ealing at the moment? Is it, has it plateaued or has it increased? I'm just interested in a little bit of colour on that.
So over the past quarter, so I've been here for 6 months. Over the past quarter, we've seen some improvement. But I don't want to suggest to you that that is a trend which is just consistent. We've had some focused activity on that area, but I think it's an area where the practice is still variable. So in terms of what you might see for a couple of months, that is not giving me a trend that I could report to you and say, I'm confident that that is that's going to be a long-standing position and we'll continue to see the improvement. I think we still have significant work to undertake to ensure that the practice is consistent in this area. And the final point to make is that the children in Ealing at the moment, we have less children in care than any of our statistical neighbours. So there's practice that we are undertaking that is working well, and we are supporting more children to remain with their families. However, the children who are coming into care and becoming looked after are presenting with greater complexity of need, and they're often coming into care in the midst of a crisis at the moment, which means that they are more likely to go missing for periods. But we are addressing that both in terms of the social care side and also the school, the education side as well. But I think it may be something for yourselves and certainly for Councillor Haley to consider whether in the future it's an area for a deep dive.
I think it's an area that I'm particularly interested in because it cuts across so many different areas of work, like education, really keeping the numbers down, supporting families and so forth. So I think it's worth having a look at. And I'm also aware of the fact that there will be cultural implications with the numbers. And I think we as a borough should be addressing some of those too. So I'd be very interested to follow that up, whether it's offline just with you and me, or whether we bring it back to group.
I think we'll give the group a chance to agree on that, and I think it's something that we may be following, all of us together. Do you have a question? Okay, go ahead.
Yes, thank you for the lovely presentation. And I'd like to draw your attention at page 48, where you state key achievements. If you could please explain in more detail about serious youth violence. And you're talking about the meetings that you've been holding to strengthen the response with partners. How often do you meet with youth? Thank you.
Right. Okay. Just to say, I'm reporting on last year's report when I wasn't here, so I don't have access to all of the detail. So I wasn't doing this myself. I'm reporting on somebody else's work, really, within that. Can you repeat the question for me, though? And I'm pretty sure I can either direct you to the right area or I can attempt an answer.
Yes, no problem. At page 48, you just state about key achievements. The first, really the first line states that you do meetings with serious youth violence to strengthen and coordinate responses with partners, including community safety teams, ensuring that key themes, patterns, and pieces of information are shared with wider partners so that we are able to collectively act on the emerging themes and trends across the borough. I just want to be, maybe if you could please explain in a little bit more detail what this entails. And also, I would like to know if these meetings, do you report to the safer communities teams within the borough and the police as well?
Yeah. Well, most of the, sorry.
Okay. So I'm just going to remind you, the report would be on 34, page 34 on your report. Yeah, 34 for him. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you. Did you see me shuffling through my papers? Okay. So I can respond from the partnership in the fact that the partnership works very closely with surrounding partners. So the community safety, yes, we've got links there and there's representation on theirs and they've got representation on our partnership too. So at a partnership level, we're very close. Some of the questioning that you've just put forward does lie with the services themselves, not at a partnership level. So we would be getting information around specific issues. However, having said that, there are a number of specific cases that the board gets involved in where we think things have gone wrong, or we think there's a piece of learning that we can do when we do a reflective review of a case that's undertaken. And at that point, we go into the actual detail and we may well appoint an independent reviewer beyond me that actually takes that review on and then transfers to the learning, gets the learning out of it through interviewing everybody that's involved. That would be including police, education, social services, community colleagues as well. So there'll be a whole number of agencies that are involved in those specific cases. But out of that, there'll be an action plan to meet the recommendations of such a report. So those are child safeguarding practice reviews that we undertake. Now, some of them, annealing, have been directed at youth violence, and there's been an unfortunate murder in one of those cases as well. So we've seen that happen. Those processes are in place, and the learning is put out there. I think for me as an independent chair, I would want to see how that learning lands and that it's actually put into place. So we do these reviews, unfortunately, fairly regularly. So these incidents do happen. In many cases, they're different. So it's different learning that comes out. But there is an opportunity for us to go back, a number of years to certain cases and say, this is what happened then. Are these circumstances still in play? These were the recommendations. Are they still being undertaken and those objectives and those plans? So that's the work that we do across the partnership. Some of the work within your questioning is much more at a practice level. Although that still interests us, particularly around the interplay between our colleagues. In the case I'm just giving you, our health colleagues were involved, the police were involved, schools and college were involved. There was not much involvement with social services. There didn't have to be. This child wasn't known to social services, but it was within those cases. And we've gone to each of those partners to assess whether or not there's further learning to be had. So that's how it kind of works within the partnership, if that answers your question. But I think at the bottom of what you were saying is, how often do we meet? And so at our level, quite often, there's the subgroups that meet regularly, but we do have regular meetings with the young people themselves. And as I say, they do attend the board. We will do, as Robert alluded to, we will do deep dives on occasion when we have a particular issue. I'll give you a quick example, which wasn't around youth crime, but it was one that Sheila commissioned that's reported in the paper, where we had some concern around mental health issues. with young people, particularly around gender identity, which has come to the fore really in the last few years, and some of the difficulties that young people have around their own identities within that. And that's manifesting itself in mental health issues within there. And there's a decision that Sheila undertook. Instead of carrying out one review, she carried out a general review across the 3 cases. And actually, there was a follow-up case, which was a similar situation. And there was learning that was gained from that we shared with each of the agencies. What will be impingent on us going into the next year is to see whether those actions were actually undertaken and whether they're still in place now. So that's how we would operate as a partnership. Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, do you have a question, Cam? Okay, Councillor, go.
It's a quick one. How does the work of the partnership gets inspected formally?
How do we get inspected?
Yes.
Right. Okay. So the partnership doesn't get inspected itself. Our work with our partners gets inspected, if that makes sense. So CQC, Ofsted will be very interested in how the work of the partnership is actually supporting individual services within that, and they'll be interested in how we operate that way. So as a formal regulator on our partnership, that we don't have that, but Ofsted will make comments, CQC will make comments on our effectiveness within that, if that makes any sense.
Sorry, I had a similar question, but my question was based on how do we train and develop initiative that we're undertaking to enhance the knowledge and the skills of the professionals who are involved in safeguarding our children. And going from that as well, I think my next question is also a bit related. From the report, I couldn't understand how the partnership is engaged with the local community in order to raise awareness or promote understanding safeguarding issues. And the reason why I asked this question is you mentioned about early intervention, and we all know how important that is. In order to have an early interventions at early stage, I think understanding safeguarding policies within the local community and creating awareness is important. So if you could just highlight how we're doing that with our partnership, that would be great. Thank you.
Right. I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head, actually, when I was talking about where we want to move into in the future. Most children's partnerships, not just in Ealing, have had a focus in the past around focusing in on services and the operation of services and how we could be working better in partnership. And partnership has not really included moving out beyond the services. And I think that's a criticism you can lay on most children's partnerships across the country. There is a single strength that you have in Ealing when you've developed the Young Ealing Safeguarding Group, the YES group. So you've got a piece of good practice there where we have been engaging with young people directly within the communities, and we have a particular access to some excellent youth work within the borough, and we have accessed some of the kids who have got care plans or are in care as well. So we have those levels. But I think what you're touching on is what I was mentioning earlier. I don't think any of the partnerships have actually engaged particularly well with communities and actually gone out to try and promote safeguarding across those communities, and actually looking at how communities themselves can actually reduce the level of risk there. And that's an area that we would want to go into. Now, it has to be done through the individual services, because there's me and there's Steve at the centre and nothing else. So we work with the services, and so we'll be working with them and how they will engage with the partners. But looking at the level of challenge that Robert's up against and our colleagues in the ICB and our police colleagues are up at the moment, I think that's the only answer for us, and that we have to go out and do better accessing the communities. And where I've seen it work well, it's worked extremely well. And particularly gaining access to some of the existing resources that's out there, either in community groups, ethnic groups, religious groups, other functions around the place that people have in particular areas, areas of households, areas of housing within. I think there's a lot that we can actually do that we haven't touched on yet. And some of the programs that we put in place in the past, I think we need to resurrect, put into there. So in summary, to what I'm trying to say, Ealing in particular has got some particular areas of good practice, particularly with accessing young people, and we've seen that at the board and we've witnessed that, and that's been going for a number of years now. But it's fairly small in comparison to the prize that you've just opened the conversation up into. I think there's an awful lot more that we as a partnership could be doing and communicating and engaging with the communities. And I think we need to see how we can shift that level of resource and effort that we've got within the partnership to actually do exactly what you've just suggested.
Thank you. I have another question, if no one asks another question. Okay. So looking at page, I think for you, it would be page 36. So the report refers to a challenge from data protection. Are you able to tell us a bit more about this?
I did ask Steve to have a look at it, actually, because the question came to me, I think, about 4 o'clock this afternoon. I believe, and Steve might jump in if I'm going to get this wrong, so the information I've got is that there was an exercise that was trying to be undertaken when we were looking at cases across both the council and with our health colleagues. And we were trying to enable that to actually happen, or at least the agencies, the organisations were trying to do it. But we fell foul, or we might have fallen foul of some of the legalities in actually sharing the data. But it does look as if we've got a way around it and that we can actually proceed now. And I think that's our intention to do it. So it was a piece of work that had every good intention to do it. And we were trying to share the data with our colleagues. But some of the legalities of that made that extremely difficult for us to do. But it does look as if we've got a way forward for
that. Thank you. Last question for me. Not quite sure, but I promise will be the last one. So what responsibility does the partnership have in ensuring the safeguarding records are being kept appropriately and audits are undertaken in these situations?
Well, we have to rely very much on some of the external regulators in this. The level of resource, this is not an excuse, it's just the level of resource in the partnership. And as I did in the introduction, the whole degree of scrutiny and challenge that the partnership can provide is very much reliant on the input that we get from the services, and also the input we get from the services upon other services, if that makes sense. So we rely on the collective challenge that we have as a group of professional services, being able to examine each other, and so that we can get that level of assurance that we do have the records, we do have the intelligence, we do have the challenge, we do have the interrogation that goes on within the partnership. And that's what I have to be assured of as chair, that that's actually taking place. One of the areas of new work that I would like to do is to actually introduce a challenge event, an annual challenge event, where we actually go around and interview each of the partners of the partnership after they've done their own self-assessment. Every agency, I'm sure Robert, I know, has done this already, they'll undergo a self-assessment themselves as to how well their practices are. I would like a self-assessment on safeguarding in particular, which can be drawn from that. And then we'll have a specific challenge event, which will be multi-agency, and we'll go around and have those in-depth conversations with each of them, which would get us to the level of assurance that you've just described. I don't think we're there yet, and it's something that I would like to see introduced for next year. So as well as having this report on a previous business plan, we've done a development session. We'll be doing further development sessions, which will result in a strategic plan, which we'll implement for next year. And that strategic plan will then be reported on the following year. So I would expect this annual report, the next one, will be based on the beginnings of a new strategy around this. The strategy will only be in about 3 or 6 months by the time I report on it, but at least you'll be able to see the direction of travel much clearer, I think, than perhaps we've done to date.
Thank you. Councillor Kwanzaa and then Councillor Rai. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Robert. I'm probably revisiting a previous point about it's good that the partnership has been able to promote active learning through the involvement of the young people safeguarding group. But however, you said that there hasn't seemed to be evidence anywhere of any productive engagement with communities, and I wonder whether that means a complete reset, and where where we're going to get this a creative approach, and how maybe the cultural competency training that we're going to be going on soon might feed into this. I'm really sort of keen to see, because we're talking about a complete reshift, and if you're saying that there might be data somewhere that shows where it works well, it'd be interesting to know a bit more about that data.
Yeah,
if that's helpful.
right. I think I need to be a little bit guarded in what I'm saying, actually, because I've only been here a short time. So, and some of this is my first impressions. I've tried to, both Steve and I in the report, we've tried to focus on Sheila's work and what the partnership has been done in that year. And I think it's reflected some areas of very good practice within there. And I'm reflecting on my 5 or 6 months it's here, and I haven't been engaging with the community myself as much as I should be. So the fault may be with me rather than saying it's not there in the community. I suspect there's lots of resource in the community. There always is. And I think what I've got to do is actually focus the work of the partnership to gain access to it more that way. So it might not be about lining up our communities. It's more about lining up the partnership so that it can access the communities, or actually just do that engagement. And sometimes it's just not, it's not data. Sometimes it's open dialogue, and it's an experience, I think, of actually working alongside people and actually, going and visiting and then being told and sharing that. The young people's group, Young Ealing Safeguarding Group, that's a really good example, because when they came to speak to us, and I've had follow-up meetings with them since, those conversations have taken me down avenues that I didn't know about and couldn't predict. And that's why they're so valuable. And I think it's actually going into those places with an open eye. I have to, and I go back to the Vice Chair's comments earlier, there's a bit of this report which has to be motherhood and apple pie. It has to be, because it's got to explain what we do. So I think there'll always be that bit within the report so that people can actually access this. I think the bit that I'm most keen on and interested in is what you've just said, is how do we engage with the communities and the public, and it's multi-layered within that. And I think I've got to create, or the partnership's got to create, very much an open door and make sure people are aware of it. I've gone to places, as you were asking about comparisons with other places, I've gone to areas and I've worked in other areas where I've seen that in action from some of the services that have gone out. They've done outreach work, they've been in the street, they've opened up pop-up shops, they've gone to churches, they've gone to mosques, synagogues, all of that. They've just put themselves in the place where the community meets, rather than waiting for the community to come to us. We'll go out to them, and also just allowing ourselves to get it wrong sometimes as well is quite helpful. And I think sort of my saying, my short time here, I could be wrong with this. Maybe this resource is already in place and exists, and I just haven't found it yet. So if somebody can point me in the right direction, that'd be great.
Thank you.
Councillor Ray.
Oh,
Sorry, do you want to? Okay.
That question, Councillor, if I may. I think it's really important to just be clear in terms of what Robert was referring to there. He's talking about the response of the wider partnership together. The individual agencies are undertaking in a considerable amount of work with different agencies and groups across the communities. So whether that is our health partners through the ICB, whether that is our partners in early help services, so our children's centres, our early year providers, our schools, there's a whole host of work that's being undertaken. I think one of the key elements now to that community engagement, it needs to be knitted together under the auspices of wider safeguarding. And safeguarding is a very broad church. So part of that safeguarding might start with the support of parents to be and new parents, and just giving advice and information and signposting all the way to some of those higher threshold challenges that we face in terms of serious youth violence and exploitation and serious abuse within family settings. It's a very broad church. So what we want to do through that community engagement is focus more on early intervention and prevention and building community resilience. And the way I think about that is that when I was growing up in Manchester, the little bit of Manchester where I grew up in, it was part of a city, but it felt like a village. Everyone knew each other. There was lots of support. When I was walking down the street as a 9-10-year-old, if someone saw me in distress or any problems, they would come and help me out. And they would probably know my parents as well and be able to give them some feedback. And I think what we want to do is build some of that support so that people in our community feel more able to step in and support one another. I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Councillor Rai.
Sorry, I've forgotten what my original question was, but I think you're absolutely right. There is quite a lot of work being undertaken with the community by different sections of the partnership, which is to be welcomed. But one of the issues that I think we should be looking at is, and I'm not sure how to describe this, but different communities have different kind of thresholds or benchmarks for certain behaviors. And we may assume that something is coercive when they don't consider it to be. So I think that sort of, and I think they are safeguarding issues. And I'm not sure how we would tackle those, but I think, I'm not expecting you to give me an answer today, but I think it's something that we need to look at and how we, as part of that partnership, deal with and kind of define them and quantify them. We've done some of that work with child sexual exploitation, but I think it needs to be kind of rolled out a little further.
I think you're absolutely correct, Councillor. We need to look at the data. We need to ensure that we continue to collate information through audits. And the activity that Robert's talking about there in terms of that community engagement piece and bringing that information in will help us in terms of developing our response in partnership, co-produced with the community. And if I just give you a very quick example, in the 6 months that I've been in the borough, one of the things that I've tried to do every week is visit a school. And each school is a very unique community. And there was a school that I visited not too long ago, and there were children there from a particular community. And the head teacher was explaining to me that some members of the community didn't understand the law in relation to safeguarding, and there was some particular safeguarding work that was commissioned to support the school leaders, the safeguarding lead, and also the parents, and also to help parents understand other ways of supporting their children and addressing behavioural issues that sometimes they may have been struggling with in some ways. And that was really beneficial for that school community. But there'll be different needs in different places, and we need to understand those needs and work in partnership with our parents.
Yeah, I'd really like to see some action in that area rather than us just discussing it, because I do think it's got very serious safeguarding implications. And that's partly why I was interested in the work around the missing children, because I think that could give us a good insight into how we deal with this particular issue.
Mrs. McGinty, I am aware that you've got 2 questions that you would like to ask, but I'm also aware that you don't want to come to the microphone. Shall I ask those questions on your behalf, or are you willing to speak on your own?
I'm sure I'll be picked up.
You won't, sorry. You won't. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sure I'll be picked up.
Oh, thank you.
Cornelia.
Okay, just before I ask the questions, I just want to clarify something, that the report deals with safeguarding that has met a particular threshold. Is that correct?
So shall I reply?
Yes, please.
Okay, it's wider than that, actually. So there are aspects of safeguarding where a particular agency, say again Robert's agency, where a threshold will be met and that will trigger an inquiry, a Section 47 inquiry, something like that. So there are thresholds in there, but the work of the partnership around safeguarding is much more general than that. And there are other aspects of safeguarding which would not hit that threshold.
Yeah, and that's the bit that I think there's, I don't think is coming across clearly here in terms of what you've responded to the councillors, that when concern arises, there may be this village idea that this is going to be brought on and recorded and looked at, when really that isn't taking place in my experience.
I think what
Mrs. McKinty, if you could just ask your 2 questions, please, and then we allow Robert to answer those. That would be very helpful. And thank you.
Really, really clear differential that needs to be drawn, because what's included in this report has met a very, very high threshold. The sort of report that what the councillor was trying to sorry, I beg your pardon. The councillor was trying to get to the nub of is that lower level types of abuse, and in very, we've got very diverse communities in Ealing, that data isn't being picked up, and it goes to the type of data that's being reported in the mandatory report. That's just what I wanted to say before I ask the question.
Thank you.
right. Sorry, if you asked the...
Can I please, may I make a clarification? What I didn't say that the data wasn't being picked up. I was merely asking whether we were going to do additional work on that, in that area of safeguarding. And I think there's a difference.
I was referring to the data that hasn't been shared between health and, which could have been anonymised, which they're going to, he said in the next 6 months they're going to do work on.
But that's not attributable to me.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Right.
So, Robert, she's going to ask her questions right now.
All right. Sorry.
Yeah.
Why do all primary and secondary why do all primary and secondary standard schools and special schools Ealing not have equal access to school nursing, and on what basis is the nursing access decided? And this relates to the main body of the report, which talks about school nursing, which would be involved in picking up neglect and invaluable in that direction, and my interest in, disproportionately disabled children are far more likely to suffer all types of abuse. And you've spoken eloquently about your group of children who are able to, support your work, but the particular interest in the disabled children who don't have that same voice, quite literally.
Robert, have you heard the question?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. I can't respond in the detail around the different access criteria to school nursing. That's something that...
Your report, and you're the scrutinizer, and you've signed it off, so why can't
Right.
you?
Okay, I would have to refer to the actual agency themselves. Now, I can do that and actually respond through the chair
Well,
here.
in the report,
Right.
it says that there's 19 secondary schools.
Mrs. McGinty, please give him time to respond.
He's just
and
said
then-
he can't respond to me.
Yeah, but
Responding in writing.
yeah, he's going to be responding in writing. So give him time to speak, please. Thank you.
Right, I shall. Can you refer me to the page to where you're referring to?
No, I'm a member of the public and you're paid to know what's in that report that you just signed off.
I do. Okay.
Mrs. McGinty, we talked about this. Please be respectful.
I am being respectful.
Okay. He will answer your question, but he just asked you in a nice manner what page. If you don't know, you don't have to share it with him. But please let me just remind you the rules.
Sorry, I made the mistake of thinking you know what was in the report you signed off. I'm sorry.
That's backtrack. Miss McGinty, thank you. Robert, please go ahead.
Okay. All right. Mr. McGinty, I'll try my best, okay? And if I'm not answering it here, I'm more than willing to answer it outside of the meeting, and I can copy the chair into that response, so it will be public. So you will get a response for that. So, and forgive me if I haven't got my finger on the pulse on every bit. So my understanding of your question was that you feel as if there's a disparity between the access to school nursing between primary, secondary, mainstream schools and special schools, and particularly around disabled children. That's my understanding of the question.
Correct.
I will look at the criteria for the access to school nursing, and I'll reply to you in writing for that within that disparity. I would like to respond in a more general case, if that's okay. It might not. I'll try to respond in a general one. When we were talking about engagement with communities, there are specific communities that we would want to engage with. Disabled children and their parents is one of those communities that we would want to engage with most closely. And I have got experience in my work past of actually doing just that. And I know the benefit that that actually provides. And particularly around kids with special needs and the families themselves within there. I do believe there's a lot of resource within the communities that we can access collectively within that. Robert quite eloquently himself was saying around how his particular services engage with the community. My role here, and Robert alluded to it as well, is to ensure that the partnership as a whole engages with the communities to the benefit of the safeguarding agenda, so that we can reduce risk and difficulties for children in the way that you're describing here. And this is a particular community that I would want the partnership to be engaged with. Now, we can do that on a number of fronts within this. And maybe I'm more than happy to have a meeting with you directly myself, if that would help. It would help me, I know that it would. And I can do that outside of the meeting, and you can take the details from how this meeting's administered, and I'll be free to access yourself within there if that's helpful within there. As I say, I can't answer the particular detail around the criteria of that that's written in the report in general terms within there. What we were talking about, or what I was presenting moving to the future, is a greater engagement around the safeguarding agenda with a variety of communities, and disabled children and their families would be one of those communities. One of the links, if forgive me for going on a little bit about this, one of the strengths of any good partnership is that each of the agencies will have a specific insight into what's going on in their communities. Our health colleagues will have an insight, our education colleagues, our social service colleagues, our police colleagues will all have a particular lens that they look through when they're dealing with the communities and trying to reduce or trying to improve their outputs within there. What we bring as a partnership, what we should bring as a partnership, is actually working across all of that and having a multifaceted lens that we can work with and look at what's happening within the communities in Ealing. And that doesn't exclude any communities. We've talked about ethnicity, we've talked about religion, we've talked about particular abilities, we've talked about economics within that. All of those different things bring benefits and challenges. And it's up to us to actually minimize risk. That's our raison d'etre. And I think working directly with communities that you've described helps us actually do that and helps us align our services better within that. So it sounds like you've set a bit of a challenge. For me personally, I'm quite happy to pick it up. I'm quite happy to separately if you wish.
Thank you, Rob. Miss McGinty, can you ask your second question, please? Thank you.
For the minutes, I want to say I want to take up his offer that he's asked. So I would like to take up your kind offer, but I have to just reiterate the point. It's the data is there. It's just not being, the oversight from how you're from where things are being looked at in terms of thresholds. You're not going to get that overview that everybody wants, in my view. Okay. Why is the same social work assessment criterion used for disabled children who have specific needs due to their disability as those who have safeguarding concerns an issue? Has any investigation work been undertaken on cost reduction and improvement of outcomes in the LAs who have implemented separate criteria as opposed to the standards for assessment criteria?
Right, I would have to look at the detail of that before I could give you a proper response. I'm sorry I'm not being able to respond as adequately as you would like me to here. But again, I have to work with colleagues in social services to look at what's actually in place at the current time. And then I could probably give you a better answer than I'm able to do at the moment. So again, that's something I can pick up with you outside here, but I would have to liaise with some colleagues ahead of that, if that's okay.
Thank you.
The person here.
Sorry. Okay, so we'll allow Rob to respond to your question.
Thanks for the question. The simple answer, the straightforward answer is that there is criteria that we are statutorily obliged to respond to through the 1989 Children Act. So where there are safeguarding concerns or concerns about the welfare and well-being of a child, assessments are required to take place through that legislation, which is linked to statutory guidance that we're required to follow, both for the welfare in relation to the welfare of children and also in relation to children who are deemed to be at risk of significant harm or experiencing significant harm. So that, yes. So children in need under section 17 of the 19.
But I asked about disabled children. You use the same criterion.
Yeah.
When people are undergoing core assessment.
Yeah.
As families want to get the same assessment.
Yeah. So. Oh.
So do you need me to repeat what I just said? Okay. I was made the differential between children in need and the safeguarding.
So all children,
who have disabilities, that was
all children, whether or not they have disabilities, if they are deemed to be a child in need or there is a safeguarding issue, they are covered by the same legislation. However, the assessment under the guidance would indicate that children with disability, just like any other child, their specific needs should be considered as part of that assessment. Where the child's wider needs are concerned and the matter relates to a wider assessment, usually referred to as an education, health and care plan, that's a different form of assessment under different legislation.
Assessment.
Yeah. So core assessment.
Other boroughs have separate criterion, which give your children with disabilities team much greater scope, yeah, and offer much and there's been it's been put into operation in many other London boroughs, and there's widespread information from Luke Clements about the benefits the cost savings and the increased outcomes, because it has the child at the centre of it, whereas to obtain support, if you are not, if you do not have a safeguarding issue, to navigate the system that's currently in place in Ealing, because now most children are assessed under the Care Act, yeah, then there's a firewall against actual services, and that prevents the children with disabilities team, targeting support for parents, and at neglect stage, because of using when my child goes to school now, 70% of parents there have a family income of £7,400. They're some of the most disadvantaged parents in the borough. And
Ms. McGinty, we're running quite late, so if you could let him finish, please.
The second part of my question is, has it been looked at? And it hasn't been looked at. It's my feeling.
Yeah.
Time, if you could.
Shall I just?
Yeah.
Come back? Just to say that that's the assessment that we follow here. Many other London boroughs follow the same assessment. I'm more than happy to actually confer with. I meet regularly with other directors of children's services across London, and I'm happy to confer with them and look at the framework and the models that they use.
Will you look at the information from Luke Clements on the matter?
No. Thank you so much, Ms. McGinty, for your time. So we're going to move forward now to item 7, and just to go and highlight our work programme for our next meeting, we'll be covering special educational needs and disabilities. And I just want to thank all the officers online. Robert, thank you for your time, and Steve for the report and for your time as well. And members, I would like to remind you that on next week, Tuesday, 21st of November, we have our Victoria Climby Foundation course arranged, and it's online. And our next panel meeting will take place 7 o'clock on Thursday, 25th of January, 2024.